going to study tonight something in the Parsha of Tzav. Parsha Tzav is a Parsha in Torah. Parsha Tzav is the Parsha of the second Parsha, Parsha Vayikra. Parsha Vayikra is the first Parsha in the third book of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. It is also called Sefer HaKorbanos, the book of the offerings and the sacrifices, because this Parsha we are learning about the different korbanot. Hashem calls Moshe and he tells them how would it be when a person wants to become close and offer a sacrifice. Daber Rabbi Yisrael, he tells them, speak to the children of Israel, v'amar to aleim, Odom ki yakriv mikem. When a person should offer an offering, and this is the order of the korbanot. I am not going to discuss korbanot. I am going to discuss tonight one and only pasuk. The pasuk that we are going to discuss, you can see in your Chumash on page 552, verse Yud Gimel, verse 13. What does the pasuk say? V'chol korban minchascha b'melach timlach. You should salt your every meal offering with salt. So basically, the two psukim before talks about a meal offering. A meal offering is that you bring from flour, oil, and usually this is referring to a person who can't afford to bring an animal. And the Torah tells us that the meal offering should not become leaven, should not become chametz. And then it mentions that we have a special mitzvah to put salt over that meal offering. And then it says a negative mitzvah. This was a mitzvah to say. Then it says, "Velo yisashbis melach bris elokecho mi'al minchasecho." You may not discontinue, you may not stop the salt of your God's covenant from upon your meal offering. Not only is there a mitzvah to say to put salt on it, you are violating a mitzvah lo ta'aseh if you don't put salt. And the salt is referred as God's covenant. The salt of your God's covenant. There's a covenant about the salt. And then the verse continues with three more words. Al kol korbanecha takriv melech. On your every offering shall you offer salt. Which means the first part of the pasuk talks about korban mincha. So you may assume that mincha, that's only flour and oil, so somehow we're going to put some salt in it. Animal is an animal offering. What do you need salt to put on an animal offering? Comes the Torah and tells you specifically, no, every single korban was offered with salt. This becomes a positive mitzvah. And this is the way the Rambam, the Mishneh Torah, the Rambam describes the mitzvah, the halacha of salting. Says the Rambam, I'm reading you his words. Mitzvah taseh, he said there's a positive mitzvah to salt, to place salt on all the korbanot before they are being offered and consumed on the mizbeach, on the altar. Shene'emar, the Rambam brings the verse of this parsha, Al kol korbancha takriv melech. On each of your offerings, you should offer salt. And the Rambam says, there's no thing, no item gets offered on the altar without salt. With the exception, the wine of the libation. If you are pouring wine, nesachim, on the altar, then you don't put salt on it. Dam, the sprinkling of the blood, does not have salt in it. And the special korban, called the korban eitzim, the korban of wood, also doesn't have salt. This is a tradition. Exactly where it comes from. It's a tradition that this korban eitzim, a wood, because he used to offer wood to be burned on the altar, also doesn't have salt. And it continues, there's a mitzvah, limloach habasar, yafe yafe kemoleach basar letzri. The mitzvah is to salt the meat. You might have think, I'm just going to put a little sprinkle of salt. Says the Rambam, no, there's a mitzvah to salt it. Yafe yafe means very good, extra good, just like you are salting meat before you are barbecuing. Me'apech et ha'ever, you turn over the animal part, umoleach, and you salt it. This is the way the mitzvah should be done originally. The Rambam only says, if you salt it a little bit, it's also kosher, but it's not the best way to do it. The normal way to do it is salting it properly. What happens if you salt it, if you offer the korban with no salt, says the Rambam, then you're getting lashes because you violated a negative prohibition. We just read in the Torah, velo tashbit melach brisa lekecha. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, even though you get lashes, the korban is still going to be a kosher korban, and it will accomplish its purpose, the specification, whatever purpose you did, except by a meal offering. A meal offering, you wouldn't be able to fulfill the mitzvah of the meal offering. Meal offering doesn't have slaughtering. The meal offering, basically, with your fingertips, you lift up some of the flour and you offer it on the mizbeach. That would not be accomplished if you did not use salt. Just to finish up, the Rambam says the salt that we are salting on all the korbanot, they are being sold, which was owned and provided to the temple by the community. So this is not the individual who brings salt. Rather, there was the tzibur, the salt which belonged, and the temple purchased on behalf of the entire community. And there were three places which they kept salt in the temple. One place was they had a special chamber, which the name of the chamber is Lishkat HaMelach, the chamber of salt, which they kept salt there for the korbanot. Second of all, there was salt on the ramp leading up to the altar. There was a pile of salt there. And third of all, there was a salt placed on the top of the mizbeach, on top of the altar. Three locations for melach, for salt. And the Rambam says, what was those three chambers, the three locations they were used for different purposes of salting. Those salt, or that salt, which was placed in the chamber of salt, that was mainly used to salt the skins, the skin of the korban. Basically, one of the gifts that the Kohanim are getting was also the skin of the animal.
You mean our part?
The other part, and that skin needs to be protected, preserved. How do you preserve it? You salt it. So that salt came from the chamber of salt. So it was specially designated to salt the skins, which was gifted to the Kohanim, to the priest.
Was all the salt the same? Some fine, some.
The Gemara discusses it. Good question. The Gemara discusses different ideas of salt. Yes. On the ram, they were salting the parts of the korban, meaning the animal limbs were salted before leading up to the mizbeach is where they were salted. The third location of salt, which was on the top of the mizbeach, that was used to salt the mincha offering and also the burnt offering of the bird, which was completely burned. That was also salted with the salt. So this is all interesting halachot, very special attention given to the salt, this location, from that location, from the third location. This is a part of the organization of the Bet HaMikdash, which not necessarily we have always the reasons, at least I am not familiar greatly with the reasons. But I want to talk tonight is a very interesting salt issue, or mitzvah. Let me bring you the Shulchan Aruch if I have it over here. Yeah. Everybody is familiar when it comes to a so-called to a Shabbat dinner, a Jewish home, a family, a guest. Everybody's sitting surrounded around the table. You make kiddush. What happens after kiddush? You're going to wash. No, if you have a big crowd, the people who went ahead and washed first, thinking they're going to get challah first, are disappointed to find out they're just going to have to wait longer. And while they wait, you can't talk, you can't communicate, because between the tilat yadayim and the motzi lechem in haaretz, you have to be completely silent. They wait, and they're obviously getting frustrated while waiting, because some people are kratzing around and taking their time, and they never ran early to go wash. So I will share with you a halacha today, which might actually help us to feel comfortable while we are waiting for the amotzi. Shulchan Aruch says in section Kuf Samach Zayin 167, the laws of the amotzi. Nahagu lehaniach melach al hashulchan. It is customary to place salt on the table. Before we say the amotzi, before you get to this meal, you display salt on the table. This actually is brought down in Tosfot, in Masechet Brachot. The Gemara Tosfot brings this custom. Why is the need to place salt on the table? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Lefi she'ashulchan domeh lemizbeach, because the table is comparable to the altar of the Bet HaMikdash. Okay? Ve'ahachila kekorban, and our food is similar to a sacrifice. V'ne'emar, and it is written, Al kol korbancha takriv melach, and all your sacrifices offer salt. So being that we have a mitzvah, which we just read in this Parsha, that every korban needs to have salt, you sit down to eat, your food is like a korban, your table is like a mizbeach, and therefore salt needs to be displayed. And then he brings a medrash. With Tosfos in Brachot brings this medrash as the basis for that custom. What does the medrash say? Listen to that. כשישראל יושבים על השולחן וממתינים זה אל זה עד שיתלו ידיהם. When he says the medrash, the Jewish people are sitting at the table and wait for each other to wash their hands. Right? Everybody's going with the nuah. V'em belo mitzvot. What do? Are you doing any mitzvah waiting? No. You don't study, you don't sing, you don't pray, you just sit and wait. What happens then? Satan mekatreg alehem. Satan makes accusations against them. Look at you guys. They don't do nothing. God, take a look at your people. Don't do nothing. Don't talk Torah, don't learn Torah, don't pray. He's trying to get an opportunity in this month, right? But he's right, don't do nothing. but we need a protection. But the Medrash, Brit Melach Megen Alehem. The covenant of salt is which protects us. Still don't know what the covenant is, it will come later. ולכן מצווה להניחו על השולחן, אפילו לא יאכלו ממנו. Therefore, it is a mitzvah he calls, to place salt on the table, even if it does not, you don't partake of it, you don't use it at all. Simply to have a display of salt, because we are waiting. In the meantime, we do nothing. And Satan comes and tries to take advantage. We need a protection. The salt will protect us. How exactly is the salt going to protect you? Doesn't say. I said the covenant of salt. Okay? So this is what I want to talk tonight. I just want to make sure that this should not be confused with the custom to dip the bread in the salt. It's a separate halacha. There is displaying the salt and there is dipping the bread in the salt. When it comes to dip the bread in the salt, that says earlier in Shulchan Aruch that this has to do with making sure that the bracha is being honored properly. That's why it says earlier, a person should not begin reciting the blessing of Hamotzi until salt or relish to season the slice of bread over which the blessing is recited is brought to the table. Why is it important to have salt or relish? So he says, so that the bread will be eaten with flavor. With flavor, this is an expression of respect for the bracha. It's a separate idea. You want to make a bracha over bread, the bracha has to be said over a flavored piece of bread, not dry, not tasteless. So you make the bracha, before you eat, you dip it. So the bracha was said over food that you are eating, which is flavored. That's what the reason for the melach is. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch says, if it is the bread was made of fine flour, or it is already flavored with some spices or with salt, as our bread is, then you don't have to wait for salt. Halachically, you don't have to dip it. Because the whole idea of dipping is to give it flavor, to have a nice bracha. Yeah, it's flavored already. It's only that, according to Kabbalah, the Alter Rebbe brings, Al Pi Kabbalah, even flavored bread should be dipped in salt, and not only to dip it in once, but rather to dip it in 3 times. This actually comes from the Zohar. 3 times. And there's actually a reason for it, according to Kabbalah. You want to hear the reason? I'm going to give you the reason for a couple minutes. I'm giving it in parentheses. I'm not in Kabbalah. Basically, it says in Kabbalah that the word melach, as we're going to see soon also, salt has the power to sweeten up severity, judgment. So you're going to wonder, salt with sweet, salty. The Kabbalah says as follows. The word melach, which is salt in Hebrew, is the numerical value of 3 times Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hashem's name. Yud Kei Vav Kei is 26. 3 times 26 is 78. Mem is 40. Lamed is 30. Chet is 8. So the word melach is 3 times Yud Kei Vav. What is the idea of 3 times Yud Kei Vav? It says in Kabbalah like this. Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name of God, which is associated with creation. The word Yud-Ke Vav-Ke actually comes from the Hebrew word Mehaveh, Abaya, which means creates. There is the Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of the attribute of Chesed, kindness, represents the name of God who wants to reveal by kindness, create, to reveal, to make a world. At the same time, if only Avaya will kick in, God's light is infinite. It would never allow the world to be able to function properly. But then comes the Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Gvura, severity, which conceals that light in order for the world to function. How does these two opposite energies work? How do they coincide? Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Chesed, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Gvura. So there is a third Yud-Ke Vav-Ke called Tiferet. Tiferet is a combination of these two powers, combines them together and kind of, integrates them one to another. That Chesed agrees to be limited by Gvura. Gvura allows Chesed to be revealed, and somehow together it's like a compromising power. But they're all coming from God Himself. It's like a Kabbalistic concept of the Sphirot. So you have Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Chesed, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Gvura, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke of Tiferet. This is 3 times Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. All this is in the Melach, in the soul. So therefore, we deep in the Melach once and twice and 3 times, representing the 3 names of Hashem, the 3 names of Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. Okay? Close the parenthesis. Let's move on. So it's very interesting, obviously, when you see that the approach to Melach, we know Melach, salt, is an important ingredient. It gives taste in the food, but still we don't find the spiritual connection to salt. To see it, that this is so spiritually connected and highlighted, that's mentioned 3 times. In one verse, you have the word melach. You see, the same verse here 3 times, which maybe it's another reason why we did 3 times. But each time the word melach is mentioned. Kabbalah talks about it. 3 times Yud-Ke Vav-Ke has to do with the 3 times Shem Hashem, which is given in the priestly blessing. Birkat Kohanim, it says, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, 1 Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. Yair Hashem panav elecha v'choneka, the 2nd time Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. Yisa Hashem panav elecha, yasem lecha shalom, is the 3rd time Yud-Ke Vav-Ke. Matter of fact, it was actually the Kohanim were also given a blessing and a covenant of salt. If you go to the Pasuk in Bamidbar, Parshas Shlach, who is it? Shlach. Parshas Achrei. The Kohanim were given the gifts of the Kehuna. So it says, Bris, no, in Koirach, chapter 18. Yeah, I'm right. Chapter 18, verse 19. What does it say? It's at least before all the gifts that is going to go to the Kohanim, and the Pasuk says, Kol Trumot HaKodashim, Asher Yarimu Bnei Yisrael LeHashem, everything that is separated from the sanctities of the children of Israel, rise up to Hashem, whatever they bring to Hashem. Natati lecha ulebanecha velivnotecha itcha lecho kolam. Hashem says to Aaron, I give him to you, your sons and daughters, with you as an eternal portion. Brit melach olam hi lifnei Hashem. It is an eternal salt-like covenant before Hashem. Lecha ulezaracha itach, to you and to your children among you. So clearly we see that the idea of the korbanot is associated with what? With melach. Hashem wants to promise Aaron. He says they're going to be given the bris, they're going to have melach, and that's why we have the name of God also 3 times in the blessing of Kohanim. Hashem, 3 times Hashem. Melach is 3 times Yud Kevavke, miracle valley. Whether a fact, it says according to Kabbalah, if you don't have soul, you should take your piece of bread and dip it in to the other piece of bread. Why? Because what's the word for bread? Chleb. In Hebrew, what do you say bread? Lechem. Lechem is the same letters as melach. So lamet chet mem, mem lamet chet. So if you dip it into lechem, you're also going to have 3 times Yud Kevavke. Right? Lechem and melach are the same. What is the covenant of melach? So the Mefarshim are discussing it in various ways. And like I said, we find the word covenant here by salt, we find the word covenant by the Kohanim. Matter of fact, in Tanakh, we also find in the book of Chronicles that when Hashem promises the kingdom of David, David HaMelech, Hashem says, Alo lachem ladat, you should know, ki Hashem Elokei Israel, Natan mamlacha, Hashem, the God of Israel, gave his kingdom LeDavid, Al Israel, Leolam, to King David over Israel forever, eternally, Lo lebanav, Brit Melach, a covenant of salt. So you have salt by King David, you have salt by the Kohanim, you have salt by the Korbanos. There is a covenant with salt. So what is the first elementary understanding why salt represents a covenant? So Rashi tells us very simply in Parsha's Korah. Rashi says, salt doesn't expire. Salt doesn't expire. It doesn't go bad. That's Rashi's words. Brit akrusa lamelach sheino masriach leolam. It never smells bad. It doesn't get spoiled. Exactly. It doesn't get spoiled. Which is the idea of the covenant. The Kohanim is an everlasting covenant. It's not a covenant that it might end at some point. So to which item are you associating an everlasting covenant? To an item which doesn't get spoiled. What is that? So, David HaMelech, Chai V'Kayam, is the king forever till Mashiach. In Mashiach is all coming from the royal family of David. Therefore, also that covenant with David is symbolized by salt. Therefore, the commentaries say that when it comes to the korbanot, is the same thing. Salt stays forever. Salt doesn't get spoiled. Hashem tells the Jewish people, you should know that just like salt, I want you to put salt, so you should realize that my korbanot, my offerings, is going to serve as an everlasting, eternal kapara, always going to atone.
Our blood has a certain amount of salt in it. If we do not have the proper amount of salt in it, we die.
God forbid, too much too low.
Yeah.
I know a woman who is in the Kleingarten for a couple of years. She was fully healthy, but she then got some condition, and she only needed one little grain of salt to be put in her mouth to help her in that time when she went through that experience. But the doctors didn't pay attention to it. And since then, she's like kind of lost it. But she only needed that. She didn't need medicine. She was just missing the little. That's what I heard from the family. And she was rushed to the hospital, whatever the hospital was, not here in the States. And if she would have only been given a little grain of salt, she would have been okay. That's exactly what she But anyway, and actually that's what the Chinuch, the famous Chinuch writes on this Parsha, Mitzvah 119. He says to salt all the korbanot because salt keeps things from getting, he actually says more. He says salt keeps things from getting rotten. And the act of the korban will save you, protect you from getting lost. And you are going to preserve yourself forever. So that's the simple idea of salt. But simply, what does it mean? The pashtas, korban. You always speak, the whole idea of korban is karov, to become close, to approach near God. And the idea of the salt is that that closeness that we develop with Hashem has to be also given permanency, like so. Don't let it rot. Don't let it get spoiled. Today I'm excited. Tomorrow I'm not. I learn on Wednesdays, going on Zoom, I sit in college, and we have a very good learning study for a session for a couple months. As expected, today he tells me, Rabbi, I needed to push myself today. I thought I'm not going to do it anymore. I said, I expected it. I'm actually surprised it took you so long. But that's the name of the game. Keep on, strong. You know, you think I'm always interested. I'm also not. We got to push ourselves, and that's, God willing, we will succeed. The whole message of the soul, which based on what Rashi tells us over here, is the idea that when it comes even to the closeness to Hashem, to what's it called, to become a korban to Hashem, you got to do it in a way that the fire should continue burning. The Rebbe once spoke about soul. Shabbat Vayikra, Tafshin Memtes, I was there, 1989. The Rebbe brought that there is psukim in Tanakh. I don't know Tanakh well, but there is verses in Tanakh which associate the word soul with recovery. Makes sense because in Hebrew, the word for recovery is lehachlim, chalim. The root word is chet lamed mem. Like a recovery center is called bet achlama in modern Hebrew or in regular Hebrew. He brought psukim which talk about the idea tachlimeini v'achieni, idea of health and recovery. And the Rebbe explained then that when a person becomes close to Hashem in a way like we spoke here, to make it in an everlasting connection like soul, how do you make it? How can I make my relationship with God permanent? The Rebbe said simply, you can connect to God logically. You can connect to God above and beyond the logic. The essential connection that you have to have. If you connect to God only based on your limited knowledge and logic, so then day it comes, tomorrow it leaves. You know, you can only do what you can do, etc. Sometimes your head is not working or you're not interested or you're getting convinced differently. But a person who stays with that relationship with Hashem, based on his core neshama, that I have neshama by God, who keeps me connected to him. Reflecting on that power of that energy that we all contain can and will give us the ability to sustain it in a permanent manner. That's the soul concept. And the novelty is that it doesn't just take care of you got the soul, it will also strengthen and recover your animal soul. Just like salt, you release the blood from salt, right? You take out the
Salt,
Salt release the blood.
exactly, that's what salt does. Here too, you release the strength of the nefesh of Hamis that fire, that boiling of the animal soul, and you will reveal that you act on your relationship with God in an essential way. And that is everlasting. This is Brit Halach Olam. So basically, the first thing that we can understand that we want to look at the soul and to tell us what does the soul remind me. The soul reminds me that I am in an ongoing connection with God. Because just like soul never spoils, I have a neshama which never gets spoiled. My neshama is always connected to Hashem, and no one can extinguish it, no one can put off the fire. And that gives me the ability to reflect on my everlasting connection. That's called the salt type of connection. That's number one. Yeah.
Isn't there a limit? Just like with salt, if we have too much salt, it kills us.
Look, I think if I would want to go with you comment, I would say if someone would only talk about this essential relationship and not act on them, it's also going to get spoiled. I'm not going to put on tefillin because I'm anyway connected. I don't have to eat kosher because I'm anyway connected. I don't have to go daven because I'm anyway connected. You can abuse it.
Yeah.
Everything can be abused. That's called abuse. The idea is to be used in a moderate manner. The second message of salt. Rashi tells us over here in Parsha Vayikra. Rashi brings a very interesting matter. Beginning of creation, the world was fully water, immersed in water. And God came and made an order, a separation. There is the upper water and the water which is under the earth. The lower water under the earth, the Medrash says, started complaining, started crying. Why are we here? We want to be up there. We also want to stay closer to you. Why would we put down below under the earth? And it's salty. And you know what God said? The Medrash says, God told the water, you know what? I'm going to compensate your descent. What is going to be the compensation? That you are going to be placed on every korban. That's the compensation. Says Rashi, you wonder why is the verse calling salt the covenant of salt? Where did the word covenant come from? The answer is because there was a covenant with the salt. Going back to the first days of creation, there was actually a covenant with salt, and by placing salt on the korban, the salt is the representative of the waters. Matter of fact, once a year we have a celebration, which is also in the Medrash, a part of the compensation for the outcry is that we have a holiday on Sukkot that we are pouring water on the altar. Is also associated with the compensation for the complaint given by the soul, by the water, by the lower water. Says Rashi, that's a bris oil. The Rebbe once spoke about this Rashi. The Rebbe said something very important, the lesson, what we learn from the soul. And he said as follows. The whole idea of a korban, we're going to speak a little more soon, is to elevate the physical God, to elevate the person to God, and so on. How do you become elevated to God? This is represented by the salt. How? The salt expressed a yearning to become close to God. They weren't like, okay, God, you want me to be here? Obviously, you're going where God wants you to go. But you have to demand and ask to be closer to Hashem. And that's what the story of the salt is. When you look at the salt, you see an item which represents an outcry, make me closer to you. I don't want to be here. And by wanting to become closer, by expressing the desire to become closer, This is actually what gives the ability for the physical to become closer to God. David HaMelech, one of his famous phrases in Tehillim, Achat sha'alti me'et Hashem, ota avakesh. God, I'm asking, I'm seeking one thing. He said, avakesh, I keep on asking for it. Shifti be'et Hashem, I want to sit. It wasn't like being passive. Okay. You put me out on shlichut, I have to lead the wars, I have to take care of the country, so it's fine. No, you do your shlichut. You do your mission. Fight wars, conquer cities. You do what you have to do because that's your mission. But don't stop to ask God, I know I'm doing it, but I want to be elsewhere. I'm asking you, please, I want to sit in your temple, dwell in your temple. Put me down next to Rabbi, put a 10 Jews to study and to fabricate. What am I putting out in this world? That's what we take from the salt. The salt, representing the waters, were the ones who were asking and begging and demanding by Hashem to. So this is the second point of salt. First is that the salt represents the unchangeable connection. Right? Salt doesn't change, doesn't spoil.
Salt is a mineral, right?
Salt.
And so it comes from the which subject of the
Domain,
domain.
inanimate.
Then
We'll come to it. I mean, very good. The second message of the salt that we just learned is based on what Rashi brings to the Medrash. Is the idea of salt that shows us that we should search and wanting to become closer, to stay closer. The third aspect of the salt is actually explained by the Ramban. Ramban says something very interesting. Salt is a mineral, what you say, an element which combines opposites. How? Says the Ramban as follows. Salt originally is part of water. It's in the water. Salt is in the water. The sun bakes on the water. The water evaporates. What do you say? Evaporates. And what does it remain? It remains salt.
That's one way. The other,
One
there are
way.
salt mines.
Yeah, that's one way. So salt and water are really, even by themselves, the salt and the water themselves of the Ramban are contradictory items. He says water makes things grow. When you want to destroy a place, you pour salt over it and nothing grows. It says by Sdom and Amorah.
Yeah, you salt the
You
field.
salt it, right? Yeah. And that's it. Gofris v'melach, tzreifok, loiti zora v'loit tatzmiach. You salt it. So here you have a very interesting thing. The salt comes from water. The water is life, energy, kindness. And here comes salt, which is being made by the opposite of water, by heat, and that causes destruction. So this is really a combination of two opposites. How does the two opposites coincide? How does salt stay in water if they are so opposite? Obviously, they have something which transcends them both and combines them both.
The chemical nature.
Call it the chemical, whatever you want to call it. Says the Ramban, a brit, that's why it's called covenant. A covenant is something which combines two opposites. The simple covenant is that I am I, you are you. We might be different, but we're still going to remain together because we're establishing a covenant. And that's why Hashem told David HaMelech, Brit Olam, it's going to be a Brit Melach, a covenant of salt. So basically, according to the Ramban, the whole idea of salt is it has the power of sustaining and the power of destruction, right? Yes, in the one hand it can cause things to stay for a long time by salting it. In the other hand, it can destroy.
There's a prohibition when we go to war that we are not supposed to cut down forests and salt the land. We're not supposed to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. So salt is a power which sustains the world, guards the world, and at the same time, it can, God forbid, cause destruction. And that's the covenant of the soul. Covenant of the soul is that this is a mix of two things together, and that two things together is what really keeps us alive. We know that we are also part of water. At the same time, we know that, God forbid, we can also get destroyed. And Hashem made the covenant of Melach to represent the connection and the combination of these two acts. That's what the Ramban says. Other Meforshim say simply. The Ibn Ezra, for example, says that the reason God wanted salt because without salt, the food is tasteless. And he says it's disrespectful to offer Hashem tasteless food. Salt brings in a taste. Brings in a taste to the korban. He says it's disrespectful. Salt takes out and releases the bitterness of the meat, it says, and it sweetens it up in a sense, makes it edible. That's what the power of salt is. It's like a sack, like transforming something. And then comes what we said before, and this is what actually the Rebbe said in a mind, based on the Shiloh. Famous Shiloh, HaKadosh writes that the whole idea of korbanot is really, like I said before, is the kiruv, the elevation of the different items, different ideas in the world. The world in general is made up of those four elements. Domain, it's translated usually as the inanimate, the silent world of silence. What do you call it? Inanimate. No? Inanimate. Tzomeach, the world of vegetation. Chai, the world of animal. Medaber, the world of humans. When you offer a korban, the person is being offered with the medaber because obviously the person who brings the korban keeps a conscious of the korban is being offered, I am being offered, we are all being offered. It's like a mix. The person is a part of this game, big part. The animal world is obviously the animal itself which is being offered. Chai. The vegetation world is the nesachim, the flower, the libations. What represents the inanimate world? So that says the Shiloh is the idea, Shiloh Kadosh, by putting the salt, because you need to elevate all four. He said before, the salt is the representative of the world of domain, world of sight. That's why in every korban there is also salt. So obviously, we understand that if the salt represents the inanimate, this is the lowest. This brings up the highest level of the connection, which is associated with the elevation of every physical thing to Hashem. No, now, when you put salt on the table and you see them watch it, understand how the salt is the protection. Because the salt, number one, is not just salt. Salt is a presentation of something deeper. The salt on the table represents the everlasting connection of the neshama, the yearning of the neshama, the elevation of everything from the world to Hashem. all this is obviously which serves as a protecting force against Satan. And Satan says they don't do nothing. Don't worry about them doing anything. They are salted. They have a connection like salt. I don't need them to do something. They are doing exactly right. Now they are meant to be silent. Now they are meant to be quiet because they have the Brit Olam. This is Brit Melach. That's the placing of salt.
Is that what the salt on the ramp was going into the altar? Was that visible salt?
No, yeah, it was used for the carbon. Yes, definitely. It was used for the carbon. I saw recently actually a Hasidic insight by a Hasidic Rebbe called the Rebbe of Mordechai, the dynasty in Poland, called Yedidia of Mordechai. He says something interesting about salt. He said, why is salt called the covenant? He says because salt is one thing that you can't eat on its own. Salt is always joining something else. It joins the bread, it joins the fish, it joins the soup, it joins the meat. It's a joining element. So when you sit them at the table and you don't do nothing, but what do you mean you don't do nothing? You don't do nothing, you wait because somebody else is washing. You're joining another Jew. So when the Satan comes and says they don't do nothing, Hashem says, look at this salt. They don't do nothing because they're waiting to join somebody. The salt is the reminder that we are involved in joining, in uniting with someone. Whatever the melach is. When you're getting ready for Pesach, it's important to know that on Pesach, the halacha is very clearly that the matzah shall not have salt in it. Only water and flour. You're not allowed to make matzah with any spices. That's why, because it says lechem oni, the bread of poverty, and the bread of poverty is bread which is only water and flour, nothing else. What about dipping the matzah in salt?
Salt.
No, in salt.
Yeah.
Salt, like Shabbat, like every time you have a meal, says in Shulchan Aruch that even according to Kabbalah, we do not dip matzah into salt because the whole idea of the salt originally halachically is why to make the bread flavorful, so it should be a respected mitzvah. Matzah, the matzah itself is the flavor. You don't need to flavor it to be respected. This is the matzah. The mitzvah, the greatest honor of the mitzvah is the matzah itself. So we don't dip matzah in salt. We don't dip matzah in salt on Pesach.
But we have a salt on the
But
table.
salt on the table you have. Because there's nothing to do with the honor of the mitzvah. This is just the mizbeach, the honorable salt, which represents our brit, our covenant with Hashem. This you have a whole year. You have it Shabbat, you have it Yom Tov, you have it during the week. You know, my wife's grandfather, Mr. White, I always mention him. On his table, he had like off the kitchen on the table, he had breakfast, supper during the week. There was a 24/7 throughout the year. There was always salt on the table. Placed like in a little plate, salt on the table. Always salt. When he ate and when he didn't eat, the salt never left the table. There was like a part of you have a table, you have a tablecloth, you have salt. The salt is on the table. Why? Because this is he was into those protective tools and items, and it felt that this is a very necessary item. Why get rid of it? You should always, at your father's house, is always on the table. Yeah? Always over the table.
24 hours.
What?
24
Yeah.
hours.
Even in the glory.
Even in a goy's house? I didn't know that. Why?
I don't think they know why. I think it's some of this stuff we borrow from the Jews and they don't
Like all
know.
the good things.
Right.
So anyway, so to summarize, this parsha is a very long parsha, but we take one pasuk. Come in, make yourself at home. Welcome. Here, we're going to take a kippah on the table there outside. There should be kippah. Even if you take one ingredient of salt, you should know. Melach. 3 times Yudke Vavke. Melach is lechem. Matter of fact, I didn't share with you a lot more, but the Alter Rebbe in the Kutetera this week, he takes talking about Melach, so many interesting things. I'm going to give you one thing. He says that a sailor is called in Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, Malach. Also Melach. Mem Lamed Ches. Because Bayona, Bayiru HaMelachim. Melachim. What's a sailor, says the Alter Rebbe? The sailor is mixing the water.
With the oars, with the oars.
And it makes the ship, the boat go. What does it say? That the whole idea of melach is also to mix the waters, which waters, to mix the waters from the upper waters with the lower waters. Basically, famous medrash that before God created the world, there was a separation. The upper world had to be up, the lower world had to be down. No one was able to connect. Then came Matan Torah. Hashem said, okay, let's bring them all together. Let the heavens join the earth, and the earth join the heavens. But you need someone to sail, to get the water from upward downward, from downward upward. This is the melach. This is the covenant of the salt, of the korban, which gives this connection of the mixing, of the traveling from waters to water. The next time when you see salt on the table, realize that this itself is a very, very important item. A lot of respect should be given to the salt. This is our whole mitzvah on his own, just to display salt. Forget about eating it. Just display it. Is a protective force.
What about Adam? What was, did he have salt in the Garden Eden?
Sure. That was called chava.
Actually, the Midrash does say something about that.
Sometimes, you don't have salt. You take the bread, you dip it in your wife's shoulder.
Seriously.
Anyway, this is the class. Next week we will continue. I may ask Abraham and Ken, this young couple, I was at their wedding 2 weeks ago. Got married in Seattle, in Rabbi Levitin, the wedding. And I'm going to sign out the legal paper. I need 2 witnesses. You can trust me that it was done all kosher. Kedat Moshe Israel, 2 wonderful people. And
Arkady.
Arkady is your father.
Also
Is
Arkady.
it right?
Easy.
No, he has a Hebrew name.
Abraham.
Avraham, Israel, originally from Tashkent. And then you have
Mariana.
Mariana, which is Seattle. I know her, probably a young lady. And very nice people that we got married, Baruch Hashem, nice wedding.
Thank
And now I'm just going to help you sign the paper. Okay? Thank you, everybody.